All right, a study of things that are labeled in the Bible as secret. After a brief break last week to think some Reformation thoughts, let's get back to our study of secret things. Some of those secret things are hidden in the omniscience of God, so those are not secret things that we will discover. We considered secret sin, the folly of hiding from God. Secret loves, treasures of the heart, how the diligence of keeping one's heart and those affections Godward is essential to make sure those secret loves are serving us well. Secret service, worshiping without recognition. Beware of that trap of the fear of man, of the desire to please man. Instead, we're thinking of one audience, and that is God's view of us. Then we considered secret keeping, truth and confidence, the reality of keeping secrets, maintaining trust when it's right to break kind of confidentiality because of some great evil or some act of protection. And today we will begin to kind of maybe build on that last study just a little bit, and next week, Lord willing, we'll have some more discussion about it as we consider secret agendas. And originally I was looking at passages that dealt with espionage and war, but I want to expand that as we think in these 2 weeks to even our ways of manipulation. Not just tactics of war, getting what we want there, but even the way that we might have our own secret agendas in our sphere of life. Most of us aren't, pulling off military tactics and, taking out enemy kings, as we'll read about today. But I wonder if we might be helped by thinking through the way we think through our agendas, the things we want day to day or in our relationships and how we go about getting them. Because as we study secret agendas, I think we could learn, yes, some principles from those big concepts of war and spies. But whatever we learn from that is probably going to need to be applied in our sphere of life and not in, elite militaristic settings. So let's consider these questions of truth, ethics, of course, war and spycraft, as we'll look at in the text. But this will make us think about relativism, situational ethics, personal agendas. All these ideas will be on the table. Part one, I really want us to look at a lot of texts that just have to do with espionage, secrecy, spying, deception. And then, Lord willing, next week we'll talk about practical application. So today, be thinking of any stories that we don't cover that deal with spying or kind of agendas that are hidden. And then take these and come back next week ready to engage in this conversation. And I'll give you some questions to think on towards the end of today. The verses that had the word secret in them that got us to this topic were first Judges chapter 3. This is one of the great stories of the Old Testament. It's one of the stories that just makes us think of the question, why does God give us the details he gives us on some of these stories? Some stories about the cycle of the judges are mentioned literally in a verse, where a 100-year cycle could be mentioned in a phrase. And then we have other stories like this one, which include a bit more detail. So I want us to look at this Judges chapter 3, beginning in verse maybe 15. This is in the midst of the cycle of Judges. God's people have sinned, gone into idolatry. They're overrun by their enemies, the Moabites, and they cry out to the Lord. God raises up a deliverer. They're rescued, and they have peace in the land. and then they drift into idolatry, and the cycle starts all over again. So we're in the middle of one of those cycles here in verse 15, Judges chapter 3. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up for them a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera the Benjamite, a left-handed man. All right, where are the left-handers in the crowd? All right, there are our right-minded people, our creatives. Honorable mention to the left-handers because it wasn't necessarily an honorable thing. It was so rare, it was seen as kind of like, that's weird. Okay, whatever. Right-handed was very normal, and we'll see how that even plays out in the story. We're told about his left-handedness, and then the story continues. The people of Israel sent tribute by him, that's Ehud, to Eglon, the king of Moab. And Ehud made for himself a sword with 2 edges, a cubit in length, and he bound it on his right thigh under his clothes. So a cubit, they say, is roughly 18 inches. So a pretty decent dagger, probably a good bit of that blade, maybe a foot of it at least, 2-edged. So it's sharp, it's going in real easy. And he hides this on his right thigh. And that could be on the inside, the outside. But the trick here is, if they were to check out somebody coming in to see their king, they're going to be looking on the other side because they're assuming any normal warrior is right-handed. So the left-handedness and the hiding on the right thigh are details that we have to connect in understanding, how did this guy get into the presence of their king when he's an Israelite? So now we know he's hiding this sword in a place they wouldn't pat him down to find. And verse 17, he presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Eglon was a very fat man. Again, that's not a memory verse I learned in school. Not one that makes the list typically, but it's a detail that is included for some reason, and it makes the story more interesting as it goes on. It makes me imagine that the tribute was more than just a bag of money. It was like all these cakes or pies or something, where this king is going to let some foreigner into his presence alone. That's a little bit of extra biblical speculation there. So we know Eglon, the king, is a very fat man. And of course, I always remembered Ehud versus Eglon, which was which, by just picturing the egg, all right? The egg shape was Eglon, the very fat man. And no, your kids shouldn't. Your kids shouldn't describe people like that. So, when you read through this with your kids or something, you might have to say, no, kids, obviously that's not what we say when we see people. But it is descriptive, and we'll see why. Maybe he could have been more temperate in his lifestyle. I don't know. When Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who carried the tribute. So all these people carried in something, and then they leave. But he himself turned back at the idols near Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he commanded silence, and all his attendants went out from his presence. And Ehud came to him as he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And he arose from his seat. And Ehud reached his left hand and took the sword from his right thigh and thrust it into his belly. And the hilt also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not pull the sword out of his belly, and the dung came out. It's all there for us. Then Ehud went out into the porch and closed the doors of the roof chamber behind him and locked them. And when he had gone out, the servants came. And they're timid. They don't know if they should interrupt they should come in, but time was passing. Finally, they come in and find their king, and they realized the espionage has been successful. In there, we had that secret message that the judge is going to deliver to King Eglon. Amidst all those details there. That's the first secret that we have in this context of espionage. There's another secret that unfolds in 1 Samuel chapter 19. That's just a couple of chapters after David kills Goliath, so not surprised to find David and Jonathan in this story. By now, King Saul is frustrated by the excitement of the people over the deliverance that came by the hand of David. Saul has killed his thousands. You remember the song? David is 10,000s. And Saul's a troubled man anyway. David was first the shepherd boy musician who played in his courts. Now he's that and the giant slayer, the favorite of the people. Chapter 19, Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, Saul my father seeks to kill you. Therefore, be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I will tell you. And so that unfolds, and there's a couple of stories like it to follow. But our word secret is here. And don't miss the two sides and see how Jonathan is on both sides. Jonathan is son of the king, and he and the servants of Saul are given a mission. If that light keeps bothering you, we're probably going to turn that row of lights off during the service. So maybe don't keep your eye on it, but we don't want somebody bothered by that flicker. I happened to see it a moment ago. So Jonathan hears a command from the king. This is what we're going to do. We're going to kill David. Jonathan, in the king's service, as the king's son, carrying out the king's mission, then kind of in his position as son of the king, goes and tells David, here's what the king's agenda is. I'm giving you the heads up. He's now, in a sense, a double agent, or I guess just a single agent, serving David with information from King Saul. And he tells David that David needs to hide himself in a secret place. So the secrecy is unfolding, the spycraft. Saul might accuse Jonathan of espionage, but nonetheless, Jonathan is protecting the king anointed. 2 Samuel chapter 15. This is years later. David is king. David is a great king, but not always a great father. Did not deal with Amnon well, and this infuriated Absalom, and that relationship was never the same. So much so that Absalom is willing to attempt to overthrow his father's throne. And in the middle of that scheming, we have the use of the word secret in 2 Samuel 15, in verse 10. Absalom sent secret messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then say, Absalom is king in Hebron. So this would be like an old-fashioned telephone system. Spread people out, make sure the message is clear that from town to town, city to city, when the trumpet blasts, when the horn sounds and you hear it, announce Absalom is king. And when that ruckus is heard by the next town and they hear that, what's that? Oh, that's right, the messenger told us to announce. That's our cue. Absalom is king. And so this message was designed to spread. And in that viral spreading of this message that Absalom is king, to create chaos and havoc in David's kingdom and allow for Absalom to rush in and take the throne. So there were these secret messengers sent out. Again, if they were caught by David's guys, they'd be in a lot of trouble. They're the agents now trying to work against the king. So we hear of that story of secrecy. And then David would write of this in the Psalms, Psalm 64 and verse 2, and he would say other things like this, but we hear the word secret when David cries out to the Lord, "Hide me from the secret plots of the wicked, from the throng of evildoers." Of course, David would understand secret plots, and there would be plenty more of them. As long as there were kings and palaces, there would be conspiracies and plots. So those words specifically of secret agendas, a secret message, secret places, secret messengers, and secret plots lead us to this conversation of secret agendas as they unfold in Scripture. So now I want to give you a couple examples of stories where people kept things secret, and we're left to now take a biblical narrative and think through, is this merely descriptive or is it prescriptive? Are we told of this and we see a good result because God was blessing the end purpose, or did he also approve of the means of getting there? So there's a lot of questions to ask about narratives, but I want you to at least hear all these accounts so that you can begin thinking this week about these ethical questions of when am I obligated to tell the truth, and who do I have to tell it to, and are there cases where I can hide things that I'm doing and keep secrets? Genesis 42 we studied. This was the story of Joseph. He's now ascended to the throne of Egypt. He's second in command to Pharaoh, and his brothers show up with all the other people from the nations to stand in line and buy their food. Joseph, you remember, recognizes them. So Genesis 42 and verse 5, the sons of Israel came to buy, among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. And you remember that story. And so we're observing a man who decides he's going to hold on to this truth revelation that he's aware of, knowing they're not, and he allows this kind of saga to unfold without revealing the whole truth, at least not yet. And so we just file that away and recognize what happened there. I don't think we would say, from the language of the text anyway, that Joseph lied about something, but clearly he's using something secretive to his advantage in this case. Exodus chapter 1. This will often be highlighted with a story to follow. God's people are now in Egypt. They have been for a long time, but a new Pharaoh comes to the throne and is not sympathetic to the Jewish people. And so we read in verse 15, then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him, but if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this? And let the male children live." The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them." So God dwelt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Again, well-known story in the ethical conversations about telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And what we're told is that they said this. Was that true? We're not told it wasn't. It may have been somewhat true, and they clearly played into that situation or that circumstance and maybe spoke honestly to the king. All that may be on the table for conversation. Reading the text, we just know what they did, and it gives us pause to stop and think about how we can deal with secrets and secret keeping. Numbers 13. And on any of these stories, again, you might have questions even now. I'm just saying, just file all this away and let's begin the conversation next week. That'll give you some time to think through these stories, make some notes even this week, and let's enjoy that conversation to follow. Numbers chapter 13. People have left Egypt. They've been in the wilderness for certainly months. And now it's time to spy out the land of Canaan. They've made it as far as Kadesh Barnea. So they've wandered through the peninsula a little bit, and they've come up on the east side of the Jordan River, and now they're going to send spies across into Israel to spy out the land. Numbers 13, verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one of a chief among them." So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the people of Israel. Verse 17, Moses sent them to spy out the land and said to them, "Go up into the Negeb and go up into the hill country and see what the land is, and whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or strongholds, whether the land is rich or poor, whether there are trees in it or not. Be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land." Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. And you remember, they returned with those grapes, one cluster of them carried on a staff between two men over their shoulders. So, imagine a grape like a melon or something, massive clusters of beautiful fruit. Point being, God said, spy out the land. God said, conduct these spy missions because this is my agenda you're serving in doing so. So we file that story away of the spies. Joshua chapter 2. Another spy story, and it's really same song, second verse, just that the first verse of the song didn't go so well because the spies came back, 10 of them with the bad report, convinced the people not to pursue entering the land, and God punishes them by sending them back into the wilderness for another 38 or 39 years, so that 40 years, a whole generation would be spent in wilderness wandering. Well, now Joshua has taken over from Moses, who died on the mountaintop, and the people, that next generation, is now again on the banks of the Jordan looking to cross over if in faith they will take God at his word. So Joshua sends spies into the land. Joshua chapter 2, verse 1. Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." And they went and came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told to the king of Jericho, "Behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." So the spies go and maybe even use the house of a prostitute as a easy cover for people coming and going. May not look suspicious, but their spycraft skills may not have been the best, because somehow somebody knew they were there. And they tell the king. Then the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, "True, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued after them on the way to the Jordan as far as the fords, and the gate was shut as soon as the pursuers had gone out. So Rahab hides the spies, clearly misleads the pursuers, and that story then is also added to our collection of spy stories, espionage, and how this fits under the umbrella of what is God's agenda that's being carried out. Joshua chapter 8. After they defeat Jericho, they approach Ai. The first approach at taking Ai fails miserably, and it reveals the sin in the camp, the sin of Achan. That is uncovered, judged, and now in mercy, God blesses the next effort to pursue Ai. But I want you to see the tactics that are used here in Joshua chapter 8, beginning in verse 3. Joshua and all the fighting men arose to go up to Ai. And Joshua chose 30,000 mighty men of valor and set them out by night. And he commanded them, "Behold, you shall lie in ambush against the city, behind it. Do not go very far from the city, but all of you remain ready. And I and all the people who are with me will approach the city. And when they come out against us, just as before, we shall flee before them." So the first group is, this is Ai in the middle. They're behind the city, just in readiness. Joshua's going to come from the side, and when they go out to meet him again, the second time, like they did before, they're going to retreat, drawing all those people out of the city, and then that band will attack Ai. Well, that's exactly what happens. And so they fake a retreat. It's all a ruse, and that allows the other flank to kind of come in and take Ai without much of a fight. And so that's a clear tactic of war. But just remember, it's just that. It's a tactic. It was all a fake. They were pretending. One could say, if you were bringing this into ethical conversations, they were misleading, they were deceiving, or lying about the need to retreat. We typically don't call that lying. We think of that as military tactics. But these are part of the scriptures that help us think about God's agenda and how do we deal with what we would call matters of secrecy, and especially in this context of spycraft, war, espionage, and such. 1 Samuel chapter 26. David is now king, anointed king, and is soon to be ruling on the throne. But for a few years more, David will be pursued by Saul in the wilderness. 1 Samuel 26, 1-4. Then the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, "Is not David hiding himself on the hill of Hachilah, which is on the east of Jeshimon?" So Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul encamped on the hill of Hachilah, which is beside the road on the east of Jeshimon. But David remained in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness, David sent out spies and learned that Saul had indeed come. So this was a back and forth for years. David eluding Saul's pursuit, but not just blindly fleeing in some direction, but going somewhere, caves and such, desert areas in the south, but having spies out there to know what's going on and what King Saul is doing and how close he's getting. Again, it's not told to us that word spy is a moral dilemma all of a sudden. We're just told this is how it happened. So that's good for us to factor into our thinking. God's anointed king pursuing God's agenda by the use of spycraft and war. 2 Samuel chapter 15. This might be a lesser known story, but it's probably one of the classic stories of a biblical mole. All right, we're familiar with prophets and kings and priests, but here's the mole tucked away in Absalom's kingdom. 2 Samuel 15, verse 32. While David was coming to the summit where God was worshipped, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat torn and dirt on his head. And David said to him, "If you go on with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king. As I have been your father's servant in time past, so now I will be your servant. Then you will defeat for me the counsel of Ahithophel." So Hushai was a counselor in David's cabinet, we might call it, a trusted one. David is fleeing the throne because Absalom's army is impressive, and David realizes now's not the time to conduct that war. He's going to hide out. Hushai is too old to travel with David, and David says, listen, you're not going to be a help to me trying to escape. You'll only be a burden, but you could be a help to me if you stay in the palace and basically keep your ears open. So he's going to go back and say to Absalom, I'll be your servant just like I was David's servant. But David's plan for him saying that was when Ahithophel, Absalom's favorite counselor, is giving advice, Hushai could give advice designed merely to frustrate and thwart what may have been a good idea by Ahithophel. He's going to be truly problematic in that cabinet of Absalom. Verse 35, "Are not Zadok and Abiathar the priests with you there?" David asked Hushai. "So whatever you hear from the king's house, tell it to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Behold, their two sons are with them, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son. And by them you shall send to me everything you hear." So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city just as Absalom was entering Jerusalem. So Hushai would play a major role in sabotaging this very short kind of coup that takes place under Absalom. And what we have there is that unfolded, and the kingdom of David is preserved by someone who's willing to go and lie to Absalom and then steal the information he hears and give it to the arch enemy. Another story to add to our collection. 2 Samuel 17. Oh, that's just more of Hushai saving David, but let's look at it. 2 Samuel 17, verse 15. Hushai hears things, and then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar the priests, "Thus and so did Ahithophel counsel Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus and so have I counseled. Now therefore send quickly and tell David, do not stay tonight at the fords of the wilderness, but by all means pass over, lest the king and all the people who are with him will be swallowed up. So just an example of how Hushai hears, of how intel has reached Absalom. They know where King David might be. If he stays there, swallowed up. So by all means necessary, cross over and get out of there. And so David is spared by this act of espionage, treason, we might call it. All right. Those are the stories I was able to come up with. Are there any other stories of secrecy or deception that we can add to our list? Ward. Yes, fantastic. So Saul hunting David. He's already married to Saul's daughter, Michal, and she even puts like a fake head there at the pillow. The guys at Alcatraz that escaped, did that. They made the paper mache heads. Great story. So yes, that's another story of, intentionally misleading and yet allowing God's anointed to escape. Good. Yes.
Bathsheba, when David was near death, and I can't remember which son was elevating himself, she conspired with the prophet to bring to David information in a kind of a covert way to spur him
Right.
to anointing Solomon.
Yes, so one of the sons is trying to get in the straight line of the descent. I think he wants to marry a concubine or something to get into the right order.
Later on, he tried to marry David's last wife.
Right. Okay, so in that case, Bathsheba helps thwart a plan that would have threatened the proper line of David's throne. Yes?
Further on in 2 Samuel 17, there was when Ahimaaz and David climbed into the well,
Yeah.
and the woman covered it up and put grain on it, and then told him they'd gone on.
Right. You could read down just a little further in chapter 17, and a woman hides those who are hiding, and again sends pursuers another way. Yeah, Dennis.
Not exactly the same as you're talking about here with deception and war, but in the theme of hidden agendas. Paul sets his mind to go to Jerusalem. He's accused by people at the temple of bringing in a Greek. This whole breaks out, and he is on trial. And in Acts 23, he perceives that there's both Pharisees and Sadducees in the crowd. When he realizes that, he throws this grenade in there and says he was on trial for the resurrection of the dead. And this whole mess breaks out where they start fighting against one another. So he has this hidden agenda of divide and conquer.
No, yeah, I think that's fair to consider. That's a little more in our realm than, assassinations and stuff. Most of us in here haven't reached high levels of military, thinking. A few have. So for the rest of us, we're looking for something to grab onto here. Like we don't do it. We may have been able to put a rug over the well and sprinkle grain on it. That might be the extent of our kind of work. But that case does help us think. He's thinking ahead of how to work the crowd. And
he knows he's not on trial for the resurrection.
Right. Clearly launched that one out there for his own purposes. Good. Others? Yeah, Kirk.
Samuel 16, Samuel David, since the Lord
Yeah, I'll just read that one because that's a good one. The Lord tells Samuel, "How long will I grieve over Saul since I have rejected him from being king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons." And Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears it, he will kill me. Well, that makes perfect sense. No king's going to let you anoint another king right under your nose. And the Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. And invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me him whom I declare to you. Again, take that story, because that one has the Lord himself kind of shaping this plan to accomplish the purpose of anointing a king, but to do it in a way that is protecting the prophet. So that's a great one to add to the mix. Yeah, Ward? Another? Right. Yes, Jonathan very intentionally describes David's absence in an inaccurate way. And then shortly after that would use the arrows, he's just out there shooting, but the distance was going to tell David whether he needs to come or go. Stories like that. Paul?
Thinking of a negative example with David and Uriah, specifically when David told Joab to withdraw from Uriah, that there is kind of a known secret, if you will, between the
Yeah.
two of them. Joab obviously goes along with this and should have questioned that situation. Probably on the flip side, or the end of that as well, we have Nathan kind of doing a little bit of deception too, with some wordplay with thou art the man, kind of almost getting David in a word trap, if you will.
Yeah.
For a different, it's not espionage, this one kind of is in a different way.
Yeah, so both of those stories are good. Again, bringing it down to our level a little bit, the second one especially. So David carries out his secret agenda in getting rid of Uriah by pushing him to the front lines by command and then having everyone else draw back to ensure that he would be overwhelmed and killed. And then we can see how Nathan the prophet confronts David by telling a story, not to manipulate him in a bad way, but clearly leading David down a path by which then God would deal with his heart. And then,
David fled to, was it Gath?
yes,
And realized that they wanted to kill him, and so he just started slobbering into his beard and acting like a madman.
right.
Anyway,
Yep. Another good one.
Not so much war related, but Isaac and Rebecca with Jacob and Esau and deceiving Isaac.
Right. Yeah, and then one of the Jacob's wives deceives her father, hiding the idols or something. Yep. Good. That's a wealth of Bible knowledge, picking out some of these stories. Right. Yep. Working his own secret plan, hoping that'll, keep attention away from them. All right, take all these stories and be ready to talk next time. And by that, much discussion. What does the Bible teach about the setting of war or the tactics of war? How are we to think biblically about acts of deception and in what context? Are there secrets we can keep? Do we have to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? When are you prone to push a secret agenda? When are you the least honest? We do want to get down to us more than just theoretically examining the ethics of some of these stories. But there are big questions, like are evildoers entitled to truth to facilitate their evil agenda? These are the questions that you wrestle with, and we need to come to biblical conclusions because some of you are going to have children or grandchildren that ask you questions after some of these stories, and it would be good for you to have thought through, like what are the building blocks that would shape our answer and applications in these different stories. So give that some time this week. I think we can have a good conversation and probably bring as much practical wisdom as we did stories from the scriptures. So Lord, help us. We want to be people marked by, driven by, carried along by truth. We understand it's essential. And yet we read some of these stories and we realize that the cause of truth is served by all these tactics and means. And by your Spirit, give us wisdom to understand why these stories are here for us and what it is we're to learn from them. And carry us along this week, if we've learned nothing else, to realize that your agenda is still at work. It is still our task at hand. So you are using us this week to speak truth, the truth of the gospel, to accomplish your kingdom's advance. And so help us, please, to that end, we pray in Jesus' name.